A street kid clutching a plastic bag walked into the most powerful law firm in New York. "Translate this, and I'll give you $1 million. The CEO laughed. Then the boy answered in 5 languages. The security guard's hand shot toward Elias before the revolving door had fully released him into the lobby. 12 years old, barefoot, clutching a plastic grocery bag like it contained the world's last hope. Elias had seen that hand reach for radios, for phones, for weapons enough times to know what came next. But today he didn't run. Inside the bag was a letter. Inside the letter was a promise his mother had made 3 days before dying in his arms. A promise that this building, Sterling and Associates International, held answers, held justice, held something that belonged to him and his 8-year-old sister Maya, currently hiding in the alley outside because she was too scared to come in. "Stop right there, kid." The guard's name tag read, Peterson. His voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd removed homeless people from luxury buildings for 20 years. "Private property. You need an appointment." Elias's English came out clear despite his racing heart. "I need to see Richard Sterling. I have something he needs to translate." The word translate rippled through the marble lobby like a stone thrown into still water. This wasn't just any law firm. Sterling and Associates specialized in international law, handled documents in dozens of languages, charged clients thousands of dollars per page for expert translations. And here stood a filthy street kid claiming he had something that needed translating. Peterson's expression shifted from annoyed to almost amused. "You have something that needs translating? Kid, do you have any idea what translation services cost here?" "I know exactly what they cost," Elias said, pulling a crumpled envelope from his bag. "That's why I'm here. My mother said this firm handled the original document. Said they'd understand why it matters." "Your mother?" Peterson's tone made it clear what he thought of that. "And where is she?" "Dead." The word came out flat, emotionless, because Elias had said it so many times in the last 72 hours that it had stopped feeling real. 3 days ago. Pneumonia. She couldn't afford the hospital. Something flickered in Peterson's eyes. Pity, maybe, or discomfort, but his hand remained on his radio. "I'm sorry about your mother, son." "But this isn't... Is there a problem here?" The voice cut through the lobby like a blade. Elias turned to see a man descending the curved staircase with the kind of presence that made everyone in the room instinctively straighten their posture. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, a suit that probably cost more than most people earned in 6 months. He moved like someone who'd never questioned his right to be anywhere. Richard Sterling. Elias recognized him from the photographs his mother had kept hidden in a shoebox under their mattress. Photographs she'd refused to explain, but had looked at sometimes with an expression Elias had never understood until now. It was grief. She'd been grieving someone who was still alive. "Sir, just a situation with..." Peterson began. "A street rat who wandered in," Richard finished, his eyes raking over Elias with open disgust. "Peterson, call social services. The city has shelters for this sort of thing." "I'm not looking for a shelter," Elias said, louder than he intended. "I'm looking for someone who can read this." He pulled a document from the envelope, pages yellowed with age, covered in what looked like multiple languages, beautiful calligraphy that had faded but remained legible. His mother's most precious possession, hidden away for years, only revealed to him on her deathbed with whispered instructions he hadn't fully understood until walking into this building. Richard's eyes landed on the document, and something changed in his face. Just for a second, a flicker of recognition, quickly masked. But Elias saw it. "Where did you get that?" Richard's voice had gone very quiet. "My mother, Isabella Reyes. She worked here. 11 years ago." The lobby went silent. Even the ambient noise of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Elias watched Richard's face cycle through emotions too quickly to name. "Isabella Reyes," Richard repeated slowly. "The cleaning woman." The way he said it, the dismissiveness, the contempt, made Elias's hands clench into fists. She wasn't just a cleaning woman. She was a translator. She spoke 6 languages. She helped you. She was hired to empty trash cans and scrub toilets. Richard cut him off. "Which she did adequately until she quit without notice and disappeared. If she told you anything different, she was lying." "She wasn't lying." Elias's shout echoed off marble. Around them, lawyers and clients froze, watching. "She translated documents for you. Important documents. Documents like this one. Richard descended the last few steps, his expression hardening into something cruel. Let me tell you something about your mother, boy. Isabella Reyes was a nobody who spoke broken Spanish and cleaned my floors. Whatever fantasy she filled your head with, whatever delusions she built up over the years, they were just that, delusions. Then prove it, Elias said, and he was surprised by how steady his voice sounded despite the tears burning behind his eyes. This document. You said she was nobody. You said she couldn't translate. So prove it. Read this. Tell me what it says. Richard's laugh was sharp, mocking. You think I'm going to stand here and play games with a street urchin? I think you can't read it, Elias shot back. I think my mother could do something you can't. I think that's why you're angry. The air in the lobby crackled with tension. Richard's face flushed red, and several witnesses actually took steps backward, sensing danger. You want me to translate that? Richard's voice dropped to something dangerous. Fine. I'll do you one better. I'll make you a deal. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and showed Elias the screen. A number glowed there. $1,000. $1 million, Richard announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. You translate this document accurately in every language it contains, and I'll transfer this money to you right now, on the spot. $1 million for a street rat who probably can't even read English. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Completely serious, Richard continued, warming to his performance. But here's the catch. You have to translate it perfectly, every word. Every language. And I'm going to verify every single translation with our expert staff. One mistake, one mispronunciation, one wrong word, and you get nothing. Nothing except being thrown out of this building for wasting everyone's time. He smiled, and it was the smile of a predator playing with prey. So, what do you say, boy? Want to put your mother's legacy to the test? Want to prove that Isabella Reyes was something more than a cleaning woman with delusions? Elias looked at the document in his hands, at the languages his mother had taught him by candlelight in their one-room apartment. Spanish first, her native tongue, spoken with the musical lilt of her hometown in Colombia. Then Mandarin, learned from the Chinese family next door who'd paid her in language lessons instead of cash for babysitting. Arabic, picked up from the Syrian refugees in their building who'd needed her help filling out forms. French, taught from library books she'd borrowed and made Elias read aloud until his pronunciation was perfect. And English, always English. The language of survival, she'd called it. The language that could open doors or slam them shut, depending on how well you wielded it. My mother used to say something, Elias said quietly, looking up at Richard. She said that language is power, that people who speak many languages can build bridges, but people who only speak one language can only build walls. Touching, Richard sneered. Is that a yes or a no? It's a yes, Elias said. I'll translate your document. Every word. Every language. Excellent. Richard gestured to someone Elias hadn't noticed before. A woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a tablet in her hands. Jennifer, my assistant, will record everything. We'll verify each translation independently. And when you fail, because you will fail, you'll leave this building and never come back. Understood? Understood, Elias said. Richard held out the document. Elias took it with hands that only shook slightly. As their fingers touched, Richard leaned close enough that only Elias could hear his whispered words. Your mother was nothing, a nobody, and so are you. This little show is just so everyone here can watch you fail and be reminded why people like you stay in the gutter where you belong. Elias met his eyes. My mother taught me one more thing. She said the biggest difference between rich people and poor people isn't money. It's whether they remember what it's like to have nothing. Profound, Richard said sarcastically, stepping back. Now translate. Or are you stalling because you're already realizing you're in over your head? Elias looked down at the document. His eyes scanned the first section, elaborate script in Spanish, the formal kind used in legal documents. His mother's handwriting in the margins, notes she'd made, corrections she'd offered. And suddenly, Elias understood why she'd kept this document hidden. Why she'd looked at Richard Sterling's photograph with such sadness. Why she'd made him promise, with her last breaths, to bring this here. This wasn't just a translation test. This was evidence. Proof of work his mother had done, work Richard had claimed as his own, work that had built this firm's reputation while Isabella Reyes had scrubbed floors and pretended she couldn't understand the conversations happening around her. "Well," Richard demanded, "cat got your tongue? Ready to admit defeat?" Elias cleared his throat. And then, in perfect Spanish, the Spanish of educated translators, not the street Spanish Richard probably expected, he began to read. En el caso de la disputa fronteriza entre las naciones de... Richard's face went white. Jennifer's fingers froze over her tablet. The crowd of lawyers and clients leaned forward, recognition dawning in some of their faces. "Wait," someone said. "That's the Cordova Treaty case." "That's impossible," Richard cut them off. "This kid can't possibly—" But Elias was already switching to Mandarin, his pronunciation flawless, the tones perfect. His mother's voice echoing in his memory. "Tones matter, mi amor. One wrong tone changes everything." Then Arabic, flowing like water. The guttural sounds his mother had struggled with but mastered, teaching Elias through patience and repetition until he could recite passages from memory. Then French, elegant and precise, every liaison perfect, every silent letter honored. And finally, back to English, translating the implications of each section, explaining the legal nuances in language so clear and professional that several lawyers actually pulled out their own phones to verify what they were hearing. When Elias finished, the lobby was completely silent. Richard Sterling stood frozen, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something that looked almost like fear. That's impossible," Richard finally managed. "You're 12 years old. You're homeless. You can't possibly." "My mother taught me," Elias said simply. "Every night. For years. She said knowledge was the one thing nobody could steal from us, that languages were bridges to futures we couldn't yet imagine." He held up the document. "This is the Cordova Treaty translation. The one that made Sterling and Associates famous 11 years ago. The one that brought in $50 million in new business. The one you claimed you personally translated." Elias's voice grew stronger. "But you didn't translate it. My mother did. Isabella Reyes. The cleaning woman who spoke 6 languages. She did the work. You took the credit. She asked for recognition, for fair payment for her skills. And you fired her. Told her nobody would believe that a woman who cleaned toilets could do this kind of work." He could see it in Richard's face. The truth. All of it. "My mother kept copies," Elias continued. "She kept notes. She kept evidence. And she taught me every language she knew because she said someday, someone would need to know the truth. Someone would need to be able to prove what really happened." "This is absurd," Richard sputtered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Anyone could claim—" "Mr. Sterling," Jennifer's voice cut through the denial. The assistant looked pale, her tablet showing something that made her hands shake. "I just pulled the original files from our archives, from 11 years ago. The translation notes are in the metadata. They're all tagged with the user ID, IEL923. "What?" Richard spun to face her. "Isabella E. Reyes, September 2023. Jennifer's voice was barely above a whisper. "She did do the work. All of it. The entire Cordova Treaty translation. Every language, every page." The lobby erupted. Lawyers shouting questions. Clients backing toward the exits. Richard's face went from red to white to something approaching gray. "You owe him $1 million, someone said. "He translated it perfectly," another voice confirmed. "I've handled Mandarin contracts for 20 years. That kid's pronunciation is better than most of our professional translators." "Where did a homeless child learn?" "His mother taught him," Jennifer said, still staring at her tablet, tears forming in her eyes. Oh God, Isabella Reyes. I remember her. She used to come in early before anyone else arrived. I'd hear her in Mr. Sterling's office sometimes, talking in different languages, working on translations. He told us she was just cleaning, that we should ignore her. "That's enough!" Richard's shout silenced the room. "This is my firm. I built this business. Some street kid with a wild story doesn't change. It's not a wild story." The new voice came from the back of the lobby. An elderly man stepped forward, expensive coat, briefcase that screamed old money. "My name is Thomas Cordova. That treaty bears my family's name. I hired Sterling and Associates 11 years ago specifically because Richard Sterling convinced me he was a polyglot who could handle the complex multilingual negotiations. Thomas walked closer, his eyes locked on Richard. But I remember Isabella. She was the one who actually fixed the errors in my Spanish, who caught the mistranslation that would have cost my family millions. I asked Richard about her. He told me she was just support staff. She was just... Richard tried. She was a master translator. Thomas interrupted. And you stole her work, claimed it as your own, built your reputation on her skill while paying her minimum wage to scrub your floors. He turned to Elias. Your mother was remarkable, son. I offered to hire her directly, you know. She refused. Said she couldn't take work from Mr. Sterling because she had children to feed and couldn't risk losing her steady job. Elias felt something break open in his chest. She never told me. She never said she could have. She protected you, Thomas said gently. The way mothers do. Even when it cost her everything. Richard was backing toward the stairs now, his confidence shattered. I need to consult with... The board will... That's impossible, Richard finally managed. You're 12 years old. You're homeless. You can't possibly know what you're saying. Every word was perfect, Jennifer whispered, still staring at her tablet. I've been checking his translations in real time using our verification software. Every language, every phrase. He didn't make a single mistake. Richard's face went from white to red. I don't care what some software says. This is clearly a trick, a scam. Someone coached this kid? Nobody coached me, Elias said quietly. My mother taught me. The same way she would have taught your translators if you'd ever bothered to ask what she could do instead of assuming she was only good for cleaning. Your mother was the woman who did the Cordova Treaty translation. Elias held up the document. This is her work. Her notes are in the margins. Her handwriting. 11 years old. Richard laughed, but it sounded forced. That's absurd. I personally handled the Cordova Treaty. It made this firm's reputation. I'm not going to stand here and let some street rat claim. Then check your files, Elias challenged. The original translation files. They'll have timestamps, digital signatures, metadata showing who actually did the work. For just a second, something like panic flashed across Richard's face. Then he smoothed it away, recovering his composure. Our files are confidential, protected. I'm not giving a child access to... I'll check them. Jennifer's voice cut through the tension. Every eye turned to her. The assistant stood straighter, her jaw set. I have access to the archives. I can pull the original Cordova files right now. Jennifer. Richard's voice carried a warning. You're overstepping. You made a public challenge, she said, not backing down. In front of 50 witnesses. You said if he translated the document perfectly, you'd pay him $1 million. He did it. Now there's a question about the document's origin. We need to verify. As your employer, I'm ordering you. As a witness to a legal agreement, I'm documenting the truth, Jennifer interrupted. Her fingers moved across her tablet. I'm pulling the files now. The lobby went silent. Elias could hear his own heartbeat. Somewhere outside, Maya was waiting, scared and alone. But he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Everything hinged on what those files would show. Jennifer's face went pale as she read her screen. Oh my God. What? Multiple voices asked at once. The original Cordova Treaty files. All of them. The Spanish translation. The Mandarin. The Arabic. The French. Jennifer looked up, her eyes wide with shock. They're all tagged with user ID IE0923. Created by... She swallowed hard. Isabella E. Reyes. September 2023. The lobby exploded into chaos. Lawyers shouting. Clients demanding explanations. Someone yelling about fraud. Someone else already on the phone with what sounded like a news station. Richard's face had gone gray. Those files were tampered with. Obviously someone... The metadata is encrypted, Jennifer said, her voice shaking. Time-stamped by our security system. These files show Isabella Reyes working in your office, Mr. Sterling. Late nights, early mornings, hundreds of hours of translation work, all credited to you. She looked up at Richard, and there was something like betrayal in her eyes. You didn't do the Cordova translation. She did. You took credit for her work. That's insane, Richard sputtered. I'm not going to stand here and... Where did your mother work? Jennifer asked Elias urgently. Besides here? Nowhere else that year, Elias said. She worked here full-time, nights, sometimes 16-hour shifts. She'd come home exhausted, her hands raw from cleaning chemicals, but she'd still sit with me and Maya and teach us languages. She said, his voice cracked, she said she was storing up knowledge to give us when we needed it. Jennifer was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I remember her. I was new here 11 years ago. I'd see her in Mr. Sterling's office early in the morning, papers spread everywhere. She'd be speaking into a recorder, different languages. I asked Mr. Sterling about it once. He told me she was just cleaning. She was just cleaning, Richard insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Whatever work she might have done was on company time, using company resources. Legally, it belongs to... Legally, you committed fraud. The new voice came from the back of the lobby. An elderly man pushed through the crowd, expensive coat, silver hair, eyes sharp with intelligence. My name is Thomas Cordova. That treaty your firm translated 11 years ago, it was for my family. And I remember the woman who actually fixed all your mistakes. Every head swiveled toward him. Richard looked like he'd seen a ghost. Mr. Cordova, Richard managed. I didn't realize you were... This is not... I came here today for a consultation about another matter, Thomas said, walking forward. But now I'm very interested in this situation. You see, I remember asking you, Richard, about the woman I'd seen working on the translations. The one who caught the critical error in the Spanish section that would have cost my family millions. He stopped in front of Elias, studying him with kind eyes. You have her eyes. Your mother? She was Isabella? Elias nodded, not trusting his voice. She was brilliant, Thomas said softly. I offered to hire her directly. She refused. Said she couldn't leave because she had children to care for and couldn't risk losing steady work. He turned to Richard. You told me she was just support staff. That her contributions were minimal. Mr. Cordova, I can explain. I don't think you can. Thomas's voice went cold. I think you stole that woman's work, built your reputation on it, got rich from it, while she scrubbed your floors and died in poverty. She died? Jennifer's whisper was horrified. 3 days ago, Elias said. Pneumonia. We couldn't afford the hospital. The silence that followed was crushing. Elias saw people in the lobby pressing hands to their mouths, saw tears on faces, saw the moment everyone understood exactly what had happened here. You're going to pay him, Thomas said to Richard. The $1 million. You made the offer publicly. He met your challenge. And given what I'm hearing about fraud and stolen work, you're going to pay it now before this gets even uglier for you. Richard's face twisted through rage and fear and calculation. I'm not... You can't make me. I can make you, Thomas said quietly. I can also make phone calls. To the Bar Association, to your other clients, to everyone who's trusted your firm based on the reputation you built on stolen work. So here's what's going to happen. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to transfer $1 million to this child right now from my personal account as payment for exposing fraud that could have eventually harmed other clients. Then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about reimbursing me and about what happens next. This is extortion, Richard hissed. This is justice, Thomas corrected. He looked at Elias. Son, do you have a bank account? Elias almost laughed. I'm 12. I sleep in an alley. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we'll set one up. Right now. Jennifer, you seem like you have a conscience. Can you help with that? Jennifer wiped her eyes. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Good. Thomas turned back to Richard. You have a choice. Cooperate now, or I'll make sure every newspaper in the country knows by morning that Sterling and Associates was built on stolen work from a woman who died in poverty while you lived in luxury. Richard opened his mouth, closed it. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once. Fine. Transfer the money. But this isn't over. I have lawyers. I have resources. You'll what? Elias asked quietly. Every eye turned to him. You'll sue a 12-year-old homeless kid for telling the truth? You'll try to take back money you publicly offered? You'll keep insisting you did work, that the digital files prove you didn't do? He took a step closer to Richard. My mother used to say that the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most money or the most power. It's the one with nothing left to lose. Because they're the only one brave enough to tell the truth. Elias held up the document, his mother's work, her handwriting, her legacy. I have nothing left to lose. My mother is dead. Maya and I are homeless. You've already taken everything from us. But you can't take this. You can't take the truth. The lobby was completely silent. Elias saw Jennifer crying, saw Thomas nodding approval, saw other people recording on their phones, this moment spreading beyond these walls already. And he saw Richard Sterling standing on his staircase, watching his empire begin to crack. The money is transferring now, Thomas said, his phone in hand. It'll take a few hours to set up the account properly, but by tomorrow you'll have access to it, son. And then we're going to talk about what happens next. About getting you and your sister somewhere safe. About making sure your mother's real legacy, not the work Sterling stole, but the knowledge she gave you, is protected and honored. Elias felt something break loose in his chest. Not quite hope. It was too early for that, but something close. Possibility, maybe. The first glimpse of a future that wasn't just survival. I need to get back to Maya, he said. My sister. She's waiting outside. She's scared. I'll walk you out, Jennifer offered. And we'll talk about next steps. About where you can stay tonight. About... Her voice broke. About everything your mother should have had and didn't. Elias nodded. He turned toward the door, clutching his plastic bag, his mother's document, the proof of everything. But before he could take a step, the lobby's front doors burst open. 2 police officers strode in, hands on their belts, expressions serious. Behind them, a woman in a social services jacket. We got a call, one officer said, scanning the lobby. His eyes landed on Elias. Something about a homeless miner causing a disturbance, creating a scene, possibly attempting fraud. Elias's blood went cold. He looked back at Richard, saw the slight smile on the man's face. He'd called them. While everyone was distracted, Richard had called the police. Officers, Richard said smoothly, descending the stairs. Thank you for coming so quickly. This child has been harassing my staff, making wild accusations, claiming to have documents that prove you're a fraud, Jennifer interrupted. Her voice was steady despite the tears still on her face. I have the files right here. Digital proof that you stole credit for work done by this child's mother. The officers looked confused. The social worker stepped forward. Regardless of any business dispute, we have reports of an unaccompanied minor. We need to take him into protective custody until we can verify his situation. No, Elias said. No, you can't. Maya, my sister, she's outside. She's only 8. If you take me, she'll be alone. We'll locate your sister, the social worker said, not unkindly. But son, you can't be on the streets. It's not safe. Safer than whatever you're going to put us in, Elias shot back, panic rising. You'll split us up. Send us to different homes. We'll never see each other again. That's what always happens. Nobody's splitting anyone up, Thomas said firmly. Officers, I'm Thomas Cordova. I'm an attorney, and I'm prepared to take temporary custody of both children pending a proper investigation. Sir, you can't just... I can, and I will, Thomas interrupted. This child has just exposed significant fraud. He's a material witness, and given that he's just been granted a substantial sum of money through a legal agreement, he needs protection, not punishment. The officers exchanged glances. The social worker looked uncertain, and Richard Sterling smiled. Actually, officers, I'd like to press charges. For trespassing, for fraud, for attempting to extort money from my firm through false claims about... The claims aren't false, Jennifer said, her voice rising. I have the proof right here. Enough! One officer shouted. Everyone calm down! Son, he looked at Elias, you're going to need to come with us. Just to sort this out. We'll find your sister. Make sure you're both safe. Please, Elias whispered. Please don't. My mother just died. Maya's all I have left. If you take me, if you put us in the system. But the officer was already reaching for him. And Elias understood, in that moment, that speaking 5 languages didn't matter. That being right didn't matter. That having proof didn't matter. Because he was 12 years old, homeless, and brown-skinned in a building full of powerful white people who could make one phone call and erase him like he'd never existed. His mother had tried to warn him, had died protecting him from exactly this. And now he'd walked right into the trap anyway. The officer's hand was inches from Elias's shoulder when the lobby doors burst open again. A woman in her 60s swept in, grey hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress and carrying a worn leather briefcase. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades fighting battles nobody else wanted to fight. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the chaos. "Do not touch that child." The officer paused, confused. "Ma'am, this is official business, and I'm his legal counsel." She pulled out a business card, handed it to the officer with steady hands. "Patricia Morrison, Family Law. I represent Elias Reyes and his sister Maya. You will not question them without me present." "We didn't know he had a lawyer," the social worker said uncertainly. "Now you do." Patricia turned to Elias, and something in her eyes made his throat tight. Recognition, understanding. "Hello, Elias. Your mother and I were friends. She asked me a long time ago to watch over you and Maya if anything ever happened to her. I've been looking for you since I heard about Isabella's death." Elias could barely breathe. "You knew my mom?" "I did." Patricia's voice softened. "We met at a legal aid clinic. She was translating for Spanish-speaking clients, volunteering her time. She told me about her children, about teaching you languages, about—" her eyes flicked to Richard, "about the work she'd done that nobody credited." She turned back to the officers. "Now, what exactly are the charges against my client?" "Mr. Sterling claims fraud and trespassing," one officer said, though he sounded less certain now. Patricia pulled out her phone, tapped something, then showed it to the officers. "This is video from the building's security cameras. Public space, obtained legally. It shows Mr. Sterling publicly offering my client $1 million to translate a document. It shows my client successfully completing that translation. It shows multiple witnesses, including Thomas Cordova, confirming the translation's accuracy." She swiped to another screen. "This is documentation from Sterling and Associates' own digital archives, provided by Ms. Jennifer Martinez." She nodded at Jennifer, showing that the original Cordova Treaty translation was performed by Isabella Reyes, not Richard Sterling, which means Mr. Sterling has been committing fraud for 11 years. The lobby went deadly quiet. "So here's what's actually happening," Patricia continued, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "My client exposed fraud. Mr. Sterling, facing exposure, is attempting to use law enforcement to silence a child. That's witness intimidation, that's abuse of process, and that's something I will pursue with every resource I have." Richard's face had gone purple. "This is absurd. I called the police because a homeless child was disrupting my business." "Your business that was built on stolen work," Patricia cut him off. "Mr. Sterling, I strongly suggest you speak with your own attorney before you say anything else, because right now, you're committing additional crimes in front of witnesses." Thomas stepped forward. "Officers, I'm prepared to take temporary custody of both children. I have a guest house on my property, full-time staff, security. They'll be safe while Ms. Morrison files the proper paperwork." The social worker looked between Patricia, Thomas, the officers, and Elias. "This is highly irregular. So is a child successfully exposing corporate fraud," Patricia said. "So is a billionaire calling the police on a 12-year-old who told the truth. We're in irregular territory all around." The officer who'd reached for Elias lowered his hand. "We'll need statements from everyone, and we'll need to verify." "You'll get everything you need," Patricia promised. "But right now, these children need food, shelter, and safety. Not interrogation, not separation, not punishment for being victims." She looked at Elias. "Where's Maya?" "Outside, hiding. She was too scared to come in." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Officers, we have an 8-year-old child hiding in an alley because she's terrified of exactly this, being taken from her brother, the only family she has left. Are we really going to prove her fears correct?" The two officers exchanged glances. Finally, one spoke. "We'll need to see the sister. Verify she's okay. Then we'll take statements from Mr. Cordova and Ms. Morrison about temporary custody arrangements. But Mr. Sterling," he turned to Richard, "you'll need to come down to the station. We have questions about these fraud allegations." Richard's face went white. "You can't seriously— I'm the victim here." "That's not what the evidence suggests," the officer said. "Sir, you can come voluntarily, or we can make this official. Your choice." Elias watched Richard Sterling, the man who'd mocked his mother, stolen her work, tried to have him arrested, being escorted toward the door by police. Watched his empire crack a little wider with each step, but he felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. And fear for Maya, still hiding, still scared. "Can we get my sister now?" Elias asked quietly. "Please?" Patricia put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Show me where she is." They found Maya 3 blocks away, huddled behind a dumpster, clutching a stuffed rabbit so worn its fur had rubbed away in patches. When she saw Elias, she burst into tears. "I heard sirens," she sobbed, as Elias hugged her. "I thought they took you. I thought I'd never see you again." "I'm here," Elias whispered into her hair. "I'm here, Butterfly. We're okay." Patricia knelt down to Maya's level. "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Patricia. I was your mama's friend, and I'm going to make sure you and Elias stay together. I promise." Maya looked at her with eyes far too old for 8 years. "Adults always promise. Then they take us anyway." "Not this time," Patricia said firmly. "Your mother asked me to protect you, and I keep my promises." Back at the building, Thomas's car was waiting. A sedan with a driver, comfortable but not ostentatious. As they drove through Manhattan, Maya pressed against Elias's side, watching the city blur past. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," Thomas said from the front seat. "My home. You'll have your own rooms, food, clothes that fit, and nobody will separate you. You have my word." "Why are you helping us?" Elias asked. "You don't know us." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Your mother saved my family millions of dollars by catching a translation error that would have destroyed a treaty. When I tried to thank her, to pay her properly, she refused, said she was just doing her job." His voice grew thick. "She was invisible to everyone except the people who actually paid attention. I paid attention, and I failed her anyway by not pushing harder to help. I won't fail her children." They drove for an hour, leaving Manhattan behind, arriving at an estate in Westchester County. Not showy, just a beautiful old house with gardens and a separate guest cottage that looked like something from a storybook. Mrs. Chen, Thomas's housekeeper, met them at the door with warm smiles and warmer soup. She showed Maya and Elias to rooms with actual beds, soft blankets, windows that looked out on trees instead of alleyways. Maya fell asleep almost instantly, curled around her rabbit. Elias couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching stars appear in a sky no longer orange with city lights, and tried to process everything that had happened. A soft knock. Patricia entered, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, handing him one. Elias shook his head. "It doesn't feel real. This morning we were sleeping behind a restaurant. Now we're here." "Your mother would be so proud," Patricia said softly. "What you did today, exposing Sterling, standing up for her legacy, that took courage most adults don't have." I was terrified. "Courage isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway." She sat down beside him. "Elias, we need to talk about what comes next. Legally, you and Maya need a guardian. I can help navigate the system, but you're going to put us in foster care." His voice went flat. "No," Patricia said firmly. "I'm going to petition for Thomas to become your legal guardian. He's willing, he's able, and he genuinely wants to help. But it'll take time. Court dates, evaluations. The system moves slowly. How long? Months, probably. Maybe longer." She squeezed his hand. "But you'll be safe here while we work through it. Thomas isn't going anywhere. Neither am I." Elias looked down at his hot chocolate. "What about Richard Sterling? Will he go to jail?" "That depends on what the investigation finds." "But Elias," Patricia's voice grew serious, "you need to understand something. Men like Richard Sterling have resources, lawyers, money, connections. This fight isn't over just because you exposed him today. So he wins anyway." "No," Patricia said. "He doesn't win. The truth is out. The digital evidence is preserved. Jennifer and Thomas are willing to testify. And I'm very, very good at my job." She smiled. "Your mother didn't just ask any lawyer to watch over you. She asked the lawyer who'd spent 30 years fighting for people the system tries to erase." "Why did she never tell me about you?" Patricia's smile faded. "Because she was protecting you. The less you knew about contingency plans, the less you'd worry. Isabella spent your whole life carrying weight you never saw so you wouldn't have to." Elias felt tears burning. "She taught me 5 languages. She never had enough food but made sure we ate. She died because she couldn't afford a doctor. And I didn't even know she had a friend who could have helped. She knew, Patricia said gently. She knew exactly where I was. She chose not to ask for help because asking meant admitting she couldn't do it alone. And your mother was the proudest woman I ever met. Proud in the best way. She refused to let circumstances define her children's worth. She pulled an envelope from her briefcase. She left this with me, years ago. Said to give it to you if anything happened to her. Elias took it with shaking hands. His name in his mother's handwriting. Inside, a letter. Mihijo, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I wanted more time. But life doesn't care what we want. You're going to be angry that I didn't tell you about Patricia, about the plans I made, about the proof I kept of Richard Sterling's theft. You're going to think I should have fought harder for myself. But Elias, I didn't fight for myself. I fought for you and Maya. Every language I taught you was a weapon for a battle I knew you'd face. Every lesson was armor. Every story was a map. Richard Sterling thinks he won by stealing my work. He didn't. My real work was you. And that, mi amor, nobody can ever steal. Be brave. Be kind. Be the bridge I always knew you were. And take care of your sister. Te amo más que todas las estrellas. Forever, Mama. Elias read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and held it against his chest. She knew. He whispered. She knew everything. She planned for this. She did, Patricia confirmed. Isabella Reyes was always 10 steps ahead. She just made it look effortless. Outside, the night was soft and quiet. Inside, Maya slept safely. And somewhere, Richard Sterling was answering very uncomfortable questions. Elias looked at Patricia. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, she said, we start building the case. We start fighting. We start making sure your mother's sacrifice meant something. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Elias? That $1 million Thomas transferred? It's yours. Really yours. We'll set up a trust, make sure it's protected, use it to give you and Maya the futures Isabella wanted for you. After she left, Elias sat alone with his mother's letter and watched stars wheel overhead in a sky bigger than any he'd seen in the city. He thought about languages and bridges, about mothers who gave everything and children who carried their legacies forward, about how the fight was just beginning. But this time, he wasn't fighting alone. 3 weeks later, Elias stood in a courthouse hallway, wearing clothes that actually fit. Thomas had taken him and Maya shopping, an experience so overwhelming that Maya had cried in the dressing room, unable to choose between 2 dresses because she'd never owned anything new before. They're ready for us, Patricia said, closing her phone. Judge Harrison agreed to an emergency hearing. Richard's lawyers tried to block it, but the evidence was too strong. Elias's stomach twisted. Inside that courtroom, his entire future would be decided. Thomas's petition for guardianship, the investigation into Richard Sterling's fraud, everything. What if it doesn't work? Maya whispered, clutching Elias's hand. What if they take us anyway? They won't, Thomas said, kneeling to her level. I promise. But Elias had learned that adult promises were fragile things. He squeezed Maya's hand tighter. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected. Judge Harrison, a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, sat behind the bench. Richard Sterling sat across the aisle with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked thinner, tired, but his eyes, when they landed on Elias, still burned with hate. Mr. Sterling, Judge Harrison began, you're facing serious allegations. Fraud, theft of intellectual property, witness intimidation. Your attorneys have claimed these charges are baseless. Ms. Morrison, Patricia stood, tablet in hand. Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. Digital files with timestamps and metadata proving Isabella Reyes performed the Cordova Treaty translation. Video footage of Mr. Sterling publicly offering $1 million to her son. Testimony from multiple witnesses, including the original client, Thomas Cordova. The boy is a con artist, one of Richard's lawyers interrupted. Coached by adults to fabricate. Your Honor, Patricia cut in. Elias Reyes is 12 years old. He successfully translated a complex legal document in 5 languages, verified independently by 3 professional translators. The only fabrication here is Mr. Sterling's claim that he did work that rightfully belonged to Isabella Reyes. Judge Harrison looked at Elias. Young man, Would you approach the bench? Elias's legs felt like water, but he stood, walked forward. The judge's eyes were kind but probing. You speak 5 languages? Yes, ma'am. English, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, and French. Who taught you? My mother. She said, his voice caught. She said knowledge was the one thing nobody could take from us. She was right. Judge Harrison glanced at her notes. I've reviewed the evidence. The digital files are compelling, but I want to understand something. Why did your mother never claim credit for her work? Elias thought about his mother's hands, raw from cleaning chemicals. About nights she'd come home exhausted but still sat with him and Maya, teaching them verb conjugations and tonal pronunciations. She tried, he said quietly. She asked Mr. Sterling for recognition, for fair payment. He fired her, told her nobody would believe a cleaning woman could do that kind of work. So she kept the evidence? She kept copies of everything. She said someday someone would need to know the truth. Tears burned behind Elias's eyes. She didn't live long enough to see it matter. The courtroom was silent. Even Richard's lawyers had stopped shuffling papers. Judge Harrison turned to Richard. Mr. Sterling, I've seen your firm's records. Isabella Reyes worked for you for 2 years. During that time, your firm's international division grew by 300%. You personally received awards for translation work, and Ms. Reyes was paid minimum wage to clean floors. Your Honor, she was hired as custodial staff. She was exploited, Judge Harrison interrupted, her voice cold. You stole her work, profited from her skills, and when this child exposed you, you tried to have him arrested. Is that accurate? Richard's face flushed. I acted within my rights. You acted like a man who knew he'd been caught. Judge Harrison closed the file. Here's my ruling. The evidence clearly demonstrates fraud. I'm referring this case to the District Attorney for Criminal Investigation. Additionally, I'm awarding Elias and Maya Reyes compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million to be paid from your personal assets, Mr. Sterling. Not your firm. You. The courtroom erupted. Richard's lawyers were shouting. Thomas was gripping Elias's shoulder. Maya had started crying. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, raising her voice, I'm granting Thomas Cordova's petition for temporary guardianship. Elias and Maya Reyes will remain in his care pending finalization of permanent arrangements. And Mr. Sterling, her eyes locked on Richard, you are hereby prohibited from any contact with these children. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Richard stood so fast his chair fell over. This is insane. You can't. I just did. We're adjourned. Judge Harrison's gavel came down like thunder. Patricia was hugging Elias. Thomas had Maya on his shoulders, the little girl laughing through tears. And Richard Sterling was being escorted from the courtroom, his empire crumbling with every step. But Elias couldn't celebrate. Not yet. Because he saw something in Richard's face as the man looked back one final time. This wasn't over. Not for him. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited. Someone had leaked the story. Is it true a child exposed corporate fraud? How does a 12-year-old speak 5 languages? What message does this send? Patricia handled them with practiced ease, giving a brief statement about justice, about Isabella Reyes's legacy, about children deserving protection. But when a reporter shoved a microphone in Elias's face, asking how it felt to win, he stopped. I didn't win, Elias said quietly. My mother is still dead. Maya and I still lost everything. Mr. Sterling losing money doesn't bring her back. Then what was the point? The reporter asked. Elias thought about his mother's letter, about languages and bridges, about the difference between justice and victory. The point is that my mother mattered, that her work mattered, that people who clean floors and scrub toilets and do invisible work, they matter. They have skills and dreams and worth that has nothing to do with their job titles. He looked directly into the camera. My mother taught me 5 languages while working 3 jobs. She died because she couldn't afford health care. That shouldn't happen. That's the point. The clip went viral within hours. Child refugee exposes billionaire fraud. Mother's legacy lives through multilingual son. The story spread across social media, news stations, international outlets. But that night, safe in Thomas's guest house with Maya asleep beside him, Elias received a message on the new phone Patricia had gotten him. Unknown number. No caller ID. You think you've won. You haven't. I built my empire once. I'll build it again. And when I do, I'll make sure everyone knows your mother was nothing but a lying cleaning woman who raised a con artist's son." Elias stared at the words, ice flooding his veins. Richard Sterling wasn't finished. The legal battle might be over, but the personal war had just begun. He deleted the message, turned off the phone, looked at Maya sleeping peacefully, finally safe, finally fed, finally warm. And Elias understood what his mother had known all along. Some battles never end. You just learn to fight them better. Tomorrow he'd tell Patricia about the message. Tomorrow they'd figure out next steps. Tomorrow the work of building a future would continue. But tonight, for the first time in 3 weeks, Elias let himself cry. For his mother, for the childhood he'd never had. For the weight of being 12 years old and carrying a legacy bigger than himself. And somewhere, he imagined Isabella Reyes watching, proud of her son, proud that her sacrifice had meant something, that her bridge had held strong enough for her children to cross. 6 months changed everything. Elias stood in front of a microphone at the United Nations, addressing a room full of diplomats, educators, and activists. At 13, he was the youngest speaker the International Language Rights Conference had ever invited. Behind him, a screen displayed his mother's photograph, Isabella Reyes, smiling in one of the few pictures where she wasn't exhausted. "My mother spoke 6 languages," Elias began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But the world only saw her as a cleaning woman. They never asked what else she could do. They never wondered if the person scrubbing their floors might also be able to translate peace treaties." The audience was silent, listening. "6 months ago, I walked into a building and proved that my mother's work that a powerful man had stolen, was real. That case made headlines. People called it justice. But here's what they don't tell you about justice." Elias paused, looking at the faces watching him. Some curious, some skeptical, some already crying. "Justice doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't erase the years my mother worked herself into an early grave. It doesn't change the fact that my 8-year-old sister still has nightmares about hiding behind dumpsters, terrified of being taken away from me." He pulled out his phone, opened it to the messages he'd been receiving for months. Not just from Richard Sterling. Those had stopped after Patricia got a restraining order. But from others. After my story went viral, I started getting messages, hundreds of them. From other children of immigrants. From people who work invisible jobs. From translators and interpreters who've had their work stolen. From families who lost someone because they couldn't afford healthcare. Elias's voice grew stronger. They all said the same thing. Your mother's story is my story. And I realized something important. This was never just about my mother. It's about millions of Isabella Reyes, people with skills the world refuses to see because of their job titles, their accents, their immigration status. He looked directly at the cameras broadcasting this speech worldwide. That's why I'm here today. To announce the Isabella Reyes Scholarship Foundation. Funded by the settlement money from Richard Sterling, it will provide full university scholarships to children of service workers, cleaners, janitors, maintenance staff, kitchen workers, the people who keep our buildings running while we pretend they don't exist. The applause started. But Elias wasn't finished. But scholarships aren't enough. We're also launching a translation cooperative, a network where multilingual workers can get fair payment for their language skills, where someone like my mother can be valued for all of what she can do, not just the work society decides is appropriate for her. Elias's hands tightened on the podium. Richard Sterling tried to destroy my mother's legacy. He stole her work, then tried to destroy her children when we fought back. Even after losing in court, he spent months sending threats, trying to intimidate us into silence. He pulled out a piece of paper, the last message Richard had sent before the restraining order, read it aloud. "You think you've won. You've only made enemies. Nobody will hire you. Nobody will believe you. You're nothing without me giving you relevance." Elias folded the paper slowly. He was wrong. We're not nothing. We're the children of Isabella Reyes. We're the students she taught. We're the community she built. And we don't need his relevance. We have our own. The standing ovation was thunderous, but Elias barely heard it. Because in the front row, Maya sat wearing the locket Eleanor had given her. Wait, wrong story. Wearing the necklace Thomas had commissioned, containing a photograph of their mother. And beside Maya sat Patricia, who'd fought every legal battle. Thomas, who'd opened his home, Jennifer, who'd risked her career to expose the truth, and dozens of others, former classmates of Isabella's, people she'd helped, families she'd translated for, all here because one woman's invisible work had touched more lives than anyone realized. After the speech, in a quiet moment backstage, Maya tugged on Elias's sleeve. "Mama would be proud," she said simply. Elias knelt down, eye level with his sister. "You think so?" "I know so. Because last night I dreamed about her. She was teaching us French verbs again, remember? The way she'd make up silly songs to help us remember?" Elias smiled through sudden tears. "Je suis, tu es, il est, ella est," Maya continued giggling. "We are, you are, they are, changing the world." A reporter found them, microphone ready. "Elias, there are rumors that Richard Sterling is attempting to appeal the court decision, that he's hired new lawyers to challenge the settlement. How does that make you feel?" Elias thought about fear, about anger, about the weight of carrying his mother's legacy at 13 years old. Then he thought about something Patricia had told him. The opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's justice. And the opposite of powerlessness isn't power, it's community. "Let him appeal," Elias said calmly. "Let him hire 100 lawyers. Let him spend his fortune fighting. Because while he's focused on destroying us, we're building something he can never tear down. We're building the future my mother believed in. And what future is that? One where a cleaning woman's child can speak at the United Nations. Where invisible work becomes visible. Where language builds bridges instead of walls." Elias looked directly into the camera. "Where kids like me and Maya don't have to choose between eating and learning, between survival and hope." The interview clip went viral faster than the original courthouse footage. Within 24 hours, donations to the Isabella Reyes Foundation exceeded $10 million. Universities reached out offering partnerships. Companies pledged to hire multilingual workers at fair wages. And in a Manhattan penthouse, Richard Sterling watched the news coverage with growing rage. His appeal had been denied. His firm was under investigation. Former colleagues avoided his calls. The empire he'd built on stolen work was crumbling, and the child he'd tried to crush was thriving. But Elias didn't know about Richard's anger that night. He was too busy helping Maya with her homework, teaching her Mandarin characters the way their mother had taught him, turning learning into a game instead of a burden. "Why do we have to learn so many languages?" Maya asked, frustrated with a particularly difficult character. "Because Mama said each language is a different way of seeing the world," Elias explained. "In Spanish we say, te quiero, I want you. In French, je t'aime, I love you. Same feeling, different words. Languages teach us that there's more than one right way to say things, more than one right way to be." Maya considered this, then carefully drew the character again. This time, perfectly. "I miss Mama," she said quietly. "Me too, Butterfly. Every single day. But we're okay now, right? We're safe?" Elias thought about the foundation bearing his mother's name, about the scholarship recipients, 20 students in their first year, each one a child of service workers, each one proof that Isabella Reyes's sacrifice had meaning. He thought about Patricia's legal victories, Thomas's unwavering support, the community that had rallied around them, the messages from strangers saying, "Your mother's story gave me courage to fight for myself." "Yeah," Elias said, pulling Maya close. "We're safe. We're more than safe. We're exactly what Mama hoped we'd be." That night, Elias added another entry to the journal Patricia had suggested he keep. Not for therapy, though it helped, but as a record. A bridge between the past and future. "Dear Mama, today I spoke at the UN. Can you believe it? The kid who used to hide in alleys is now addressing world leaders. The foundation has 20 scholars. The cooperative has 300 members. Your legacy is growing. But the best part," Maya laughed today, really laughed. Not the scared laugh she had when we were on the streets. A real, genuine 8-year-old giggle because I messed up a Mandarin tone and accidentally said horse instead of mother. "You were right about everything. Languages are bridges. Knowledge is power no one can steal. And love, the kind you gave us, it doesn't end with death. It grows. Te amo más que todas las estrellas, Mama. Forever, Elias." He closed the journal, turned off the light, and listened to Maya's soft breathing in the next room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Richard Sterling's lawyers would keep fighting. The foundation would face obstacles. The work would continue. But tonight, two children who'd started with nothing slept soundly in a home filled with love. And somewhere, Isabella Reyes smiled. Her bridge had held. Her children had crossed. And on the other side, they were building bridges of their own. 2 years had changed the world. Elias stood in the renovated community center in Queens, the same neighborhood where he and Maya had once slept in alleys. At 15, he was taller now, voice deeper, but his eyes still held the same determination they'd carried that first day walking into Sterling and Associates. The center bore a bronze plaque, Isabella Reyes Memorial Language Center, where bridges are built. Today was the graduation ceremony. 50 students, children of janitors, housekeepers, kitchen staff, delivery drivers, receiving certificates in multilingual proficiency. Each one proof that invisible work raised visible brilliance. Maya, now 10, stood at the microphone with confidence their mother would have recognized. No more hiding. No more fear. My mama used to say that speaking many languages means you can talk to many hearts, Maya said, her voice clear and strong. Today, we're not just graduating students. We're graduating bridge builders. People who'll connect worlds my mama never got to see. In the front row, Thomas wiped his eyes. Beside him, Patricia smiled through tears. Jennifer, who'd quit Sterling and Associates to become the foundation's director, applauded loudly. And in the back, trying to stay unnoticed, sat a man in his late 40s, thinner than he'd been 2 years ago, humbled by bankruptcy, legal battles, and the collapse of everything he'd built on lies. Richard Sterling had come to witness what he'd tried to destroy. After the ceremony, as families celebrated and students posed for photos, Richard approached Elias. Patricia moved to intercept, but Elias held up a hand. It's okay. Richard stood 3 feet away, hands in pockets, looking at the floor. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed to see this, to see what your mother's legacy actually built. Why? Elias asked simply. Because I spent my whole life believing that worth came from wealth, that success meant being above people, not lifting them up. Richard's voice cracked. Your mother knew something I didn't. She knew that the richest person isn't the one with the most money. It's the one who gives the most away. He pulled out an envelope, handed it to Elias. Inside, a check for $100,000. It's everything I have left, Richard said. After the lawsuits, the fines, the restitution. I lost my firm, my reputation, my fortune. All I have left is this, and the knowledge that I destroyed something beautiful because I was too proud to admit I needed help from someone I considered beneath me. Elias looked at the check, then at Richard. My mother would have helped you, even after everything. That's who she was. I know. Tears streamed down Richard's face, and that's what I can never forgive myself for. I had someone extraordinary in my building, and I only saw a cleaning woman. I had genius translating my documents, and I called it menial labor. I had the chance to do something good, and I chose greed instead. He turned to leave, but Elias stopped him. Mr. Sterling, the foundation has a program. Job placement for people starting over, people who've lost everything and need a second chance. Richard laughed bitterly. You're offering me charity? After what I did? I'm offering you a bridge, Elias corrected. My mother built bridges. That's what this foundation does. We don't just help people who deserve it. We help people who need it. There's a difference. Richard stared at him, speechless. We have openings for ESL teachers, Elias continued. People who speak multiple languages, who can help immigrants learn English. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work. And maybe, he paused, maybe it's the work you were always supposed to be doing. Patricia arrived, protective instincts blazing. Elias, you don't have to. I want to, Elias said firmly. My mother taught me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Mr. Sterling hurt us, but hurting him back doesn't heal anything. He looked at Richard. You have a choice. You can disappear into bitterness, or you can use what you know, the languages you actually do speak, the privilege you actually did have, to help people like my mother. People who need someone to believe they're more than their job titles. Richard's hands shook as he took the Foundation's information card Elias offered. Why would you do this? After everything? Because my mother would have, Elias said simply. And because bridges work both ways. You help people cross to opportunity. But sometimes, people need to help you cross back to your humanity. Richard left without another word, card clutched in his hand, tears on his face. Maya appeared at Elias's side. Did you just offer a job to the man who tried to destroy us? I offered him a chance, Elias corrected. What he does with it is his choice. That evening, as the center emptied and the celebration wound down, Elias and Maya stood alone in the main hall. On the walls hung photographs, Isabella Reyes teaching children, graduation ceremonies, success stories, bridges built from languages and hope. Do you think Mama knows? Maya asked. About all of this? Elias thought about the 50 graduates, about the 300 families the Foundation had helped, about the cooperative that now employed 2,000 multilingual workers at fair wages, about Richard Sterling, broken and humbled maybe, just maybe, learning what it meant to serve instead of exploit. I think Mama always knew, Elias said. I think she knew that teaching us languages wasn't just about words. It was about teaching us to see the world through different eyes, to understand that everyone has value, even when the world refuses to see it. He pulled out his phone, opened to the voice memo app. He still recorded messages sometimes, pretending his mother could hear them. But this time, he didn't record. He just stood there, in the center bearing her name, surrounded by the bridges she'd built. And he realized something profound. He didn't need to speak to her anymore, because everything he needed to say, he was living. Maya took his hand. Come on. Thomas made dinner. He said, we're celebrating. Celebrating what? Being alive. Being together. Being proof that Mama's sacrifice mattered. Maya smiled, the real smile of a child who'd learned to feel safe again. Being exactly who she always knew we'd become. They walked out together, turning off the lights, leaving the center ready for tomorrow's students, tomorrow's bridges, tomorrow's proof that invisible work raises visible change. Outside, the Queens neighborhood buzzed with life. The same streets where Elias had once hidden now held his mother's legacy. The same buildings where Isabella had scrubbed floors now contained futures she'd made possible. And somewhere, in the languages spoken by graduates, in the opportunities created by the Foundation, in the hearts changed by one woman's quiet dignity, Isabella Reyes was finally, truly seen, not as a cleaning woman, not as a victim, not as someone who died too young with dreams unfulfilled, but as what she'd always been, a bridge builder who taught her children that the strongest structures aren't made of steel and stone. They're made of words and hope and love that refuses to die.